Welcome everyone to the Betsy and Walter Stern Conference Center here at the Hudson Institute. I'm John Walters, the Chief Operating Officer of Hudson. On behalf of our President, Ken Weinstein, I'd like to welcome all of you here today. Rainy day, but thanks for coming to this, I think, very interesting and, as a novice, I believe, groundbreaking report. I'm happy to introduce Senior Fellow Hank Cardello, who has been the one whose research has made today possible and whose groundbreaking report, Better For You Foods, It's Just Good Business, will be our topic. This report examines efforts by the food and beverage industry to sell better-for-you food products and what impact those efforts have had on major consumer packaged good companies' bottom line. This project is the culmination of months of work by Hank, who directs our Obesity Solutions Initiative. Project was made possible by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and we'd like to thank them for this partnership and for supporting work we think is important. I have kids. This is a big issue. Over the 3 decades, Hank was an executive in some of the world's largest food and beverage companies, including General Mills, Coca-Cola, Anheuser-Busch, and Cadbury Schweppes. He is the author of the book Stuffed, an insider's look at who really is making America fat, published by HarperCollins. He is also a regular columnist for The Atlantic and has contributed to the New York Times, CNN, Newsweek, NPR, Good Morning America, and all the major networks. Hank partly attributes his unique approach to his undergraduate degree in materials science and metallurgy, but he also holds an MBA from Wharton. He's been a great colleague here, and I could not be happier to introduce Hank Cardello.
Thank you, Jim. Well, thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. Appreciate you coming out here and joining us, even with the bad weather. Today's going to be a unique day, and what I wanted to first do, though, is just very quickly tell you who's on our panel and also to introduce and say hi to some folks. With us from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is Jim Marks, who's Senior Vice President and heads up their health group. We have Rick Klauser with Nestle Infant Nutrition here in the United States. We have Dr. Susie Crockett, who's Senior Technology Officer and Vice President at General Mills and heads up all their health and wellness initiatives. Laura Berry, who's the Executive Director for the Interface Center on Corporate Responsibility. And I'd also like to say, recognize some folks. First of all, you have to recognize your team because you don't get here unless you recognize your team. So I'd like to thank Dr. Margaret Leach, Daniel Green, Madeline Livingston, Jeff Wolfson, our industry analyst extraordinaire. I'd also welcome 2 other guests here, Mr. Mr. Jim Gregory with Corbrand, and we're going to share some of our data, which comes from his company. They've been tracking reputation type data for 20 years. And finally, I cannot go through with this presentation without mentioning Dr. Tracy Orleans from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, who is the energy behind this and the vision, and kept me going on this thing. And I just think she's so absolutely terrific, and I just want to recognize that. So anyway, let's get on. So before I have a commercial here. I'm supposed to say, welcome to our Ustream online viewers. And if you have a question while watching online, please tweet it to us using Hudson's Twitter. So we're going to get tweeted today. The handle is at Hudson Institute. So again, at Hudson Institute. Okay. You know, a lot of people ask me why a former executive is even doing this. And so I want to share a little something. Several years ago, I ran into a wall on my health, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong, and they didn't have an answer for me, and I finally had a potential diagnosis of leukemia. So I remember sitting in, I lived in Atlanta at the time, and I'm sitting in my car outside the Atlanta Cancer Center. And I'm supposed to go in for somebody to stick a needle in my bone marrow. It's like, don't really want to do this. But it forced me to think. And in that moment, you never know when you cross your personal Rubicon. I guess people who come out of consumer products marketing are optimists, or at least in denial. Perhaps maybe that's a better trait. See, I can say that because I was one of those guys. And I guess I made the proverbial promise and said, okay, I don't know if this is just a false alarm or if I'm toast in 12 months, but I will make a commitment to help people live longer, healthier lives through food. So anyway, I go in, I convinced them to take a blood test, not stick. I didn't want the needle. So they did a blood test, they checked out the blood, found some things in there, and they said, but don't have leukemia. Thank you guys, out of here. I enjoyed meeting you. Thank you very much. That's the good news then. Now I have to deliver the goods. So now I have to keep the promise. So this is part of trying to keep that promise in a way that all of us have our own unique ways to approach life and what we're here to do. And this is what I'm here to do. And what we're trying to do here at Hudson with our Obesity Solutions Initiative is to be a bridge. To be a bridge to a solution on an intractable problem like obesity, which we've been tackling for over a decade. And we're going to talk today about some very, very exciting findings that we have. You all know that obesity is a problem. This is the latest map. CDC puts a map together for all the states, and you can see that unfortunately there are no states below 20% obesity rate any longer. Colorado held on for a while, but now it's below it's joined the rest of the crowd. This is a serious problem. And we still don't have an answer for it. It's still, when you look at obesity rates, between overweight and obesity, it's at least 2/3 of the adults. And more scary is it's happening to our kids now. So what we did is, this is the first project that examines whether there is a business case for selling more better-for-you foods and beverages. You know, we've been going at it for, again, a long time. So how do we change the rules? How do we go at this a little bit differently to start coming up with solutions, given that the problem isn't going away? So we had 3 key goals for this particular project. Number 1 is to determine if consumer packaged goods companies and their beverage companions that emphasize what we call better-for-you foods actually could see some results, performance results. Were their profits going up? Were their sales going up? Things like that. So that was the primary motive for this particular study. We also, assuming that worked out, we would use this information to help accelerate the transition or transformation of product portfolios into these better-for-you products. And finally, of course, ultimately serve as some impetus to try to oomph along some change to fixing obesity. So we looked at 15 of your top companies, food and beverage companies. These guys account for about 1/3 of all the food and beverage sales in grocery stores and drugstores. And these are all the familiar names. And what we did is, this is a different kind of study because we looked at data that was more financial. Generally, you see this kind of chart. I don't want to belabor this chart, but basically we looked at a lot of financial data, which comes from corporate annual reports, or they're reported from the Wall Street sources or Yahoo Finance. We also looked at Nielsen data. Nielsen is your Cadillac, so to speak, for determining the sales that these consumer products have in grocery stores and other similar outlets. And then we used Core Brand, as I mentioned earlier, as a source for reputation data. They do an annual brand power ranking. And then finally, we put together categories of foods, which we'll explain momentarily. And again, we're not trying to set up new nutritional standards. We're just trying to look at companies that are selling more of these better-for-you products versus those that sell less, and see if there are differences in the way their performance metrics are. So our conclusions, top-line conclusions before getting into detail, are that companies that gain more than average sales out of their better-for-you products are really delivering the goods. They're seeing superior growth in their sales. They're seeing improvements to their operating profits. They also have higher operating profits to begin with. We're seeing that they have better returns to their shareholders, and the reputation is superior. So again, this is important stuff, because one of the things that has not entered into the dialogue is everyone has goals. On the one hand, from a public health perspective, we have the goal of trying to reverse obesity and childhood obesity. On the other hand, when you look at a corporation, I've said this to people, when I used to go into a corporation, I used to get a sheet every day, and it had yesterday's sales compared to the month before, the quarter before, last year, 5 years ago. And unfortunately, the sheet doesn't have any attaboys for doing the right thing, because the shareholders who invest in these companies, they want the stock price to go up. That's why they invest in the company. So you're fighting that built-in dynamic. They're in business to make a profit. If they don't make a profit, they die. All right? So the key is, how do we align that need with the need to really address a serious societal problem? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about a snapshot first as to what we found before we get into the finding. First of all, we created these 3 product categorizations. And again, this is not a new nutritional standard. We basically looked across the spectrum, starting from, let's say, more, standards developed by the nutrition community, which tend to be a little stricter. We look at the other end, where we've seen some Wall Street analyst report, where they tend to be very wide open. We've talked to a number of people in the food industry to get their perspectives on it, and we actually looked at reports that evaluate the consumer to see what the consumers say about what they view as healthier for them. So what you're going to see today, so when we talk about a light product, we mean no low reduced calorie type products. And this could be a naturally, low, it could be bottled water, it could be flavored waters, but it also could be a diet soda. Again, we're not judging these products on nutritional content, we're judging them on improving the portfolio to start getting the calories out. The second category we use is what we call good products. I mean, some of these are obvious. Oatmeal, all right? Whole grain cereal, all right? These are the obvious ones. But also we're talking about improvements on the traditional product portfolios, making them better, taking the fat out, reducing sugar, okay? Directions that these companies are moving into. And also products that are perceived by the consumer. They may be actually healthier or perceived by the consumer as healthier. For example, yogurt. Yogurt tends to be one of these types of products. So when you add up light plus good, that gives us what we term today as better for you. And that's what we'll be focusing on today. And of course, traditional are all the other products in the portfolio. A lot of the ones you're used to, the full sodas, Oreos, etc., those kind of products, potato chips. Now, just to give you, we will have a complete map of all the products that we assess by company online. Our online is actually obesity-solutions.com. So if you want to go take a look at that afterwards. But this just gives you some examples of the kinds of products and how we're categorized. And we have 3 company examples here. Again, Crystal Light, Aquafina, Slim Fast, those are the kind of products specifically designed to be lower in calories. And then you have these good products, again, running from baked Lay's, which is 20% less calories than a regular Lay's, Lipton dry soups, etc. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, Oreos, Pepsi, Skippy peanut butter. And again, I really want to emphasize here, we're not here to create a new nutritional standard. We're just here to aggregate the companies that sell more of these better-for-you products and compare them to the companies that aren't selling as many of these products to see if there really is a difference to these companies' bottom line. So what we found is that almost 40% of the product sales are derived from these better-for-you products. So you have basically a 40-60 ratio. What it also says, though, by that is that the 60% is still pretty important to these companies. Companies still need the volume. And again, the volume that we looked at in this study accounted for about $100 million in sales in the United States. So if you want to do simple math, we have almost $40 billion in sales in Better For You, but also $61 billion in sales coming from traditional products. So it is a challenge, as you'll hear from companies, that it's not an either-or type of proposition when we talk about how to improve. What we're really saying here today is to provide evidence that companies should move in the direction of Better For You because it's just good for them to do. Now, we'll look at it by companies just so you know what we're talking about and whom we're talking about. The companies that were above average, that's what, when I use the term above average or larger BFY portfolios, we're talking about the companies on the left and the companies on the right have a smaller percent. I also need to emphasize that there's the issue of company birthright. In other words, if your company starts as an ice cream, soda, and cookie company, it's real tough to have a very high percentage of your portfolio in these better-for-you products. What's more important is not to vilify companies for their percent of better for you, but rather to show progress. We're trying to show that we're moving in the right direction and create some kind of metric that these companies can use so that they can adopt these kind of metrics so we can see, we can assess progress. All right, so that's a big deal. So I want to stress that. It's nice. Very calming music. I can zen for the rest. Now, I can't help it. Now, some surprises in here as we looked over a 5-year period with our Nielsen data. So we looked through the first quarter of 2011, so we go back into 2007. Over this 5-year period, some natural expectation here, companies like General Mills and Kellogg's and Campbell's improve their better-for-you portfolio. But again, you get some surprises in here, like Hormel and Sara Lee also increasing. So again, this is why I stress, let's not focus on where their starting point is because of their birthright, but let's look at what kind of progress companies are making. Now, what we won't be showing today, which is also interesting, is that when you look at the absolute dollars of better-for-you products sold, your companies like Kraft, Nestle, and Pepsi are selling the most of these products, even though some of their percent of their portfolio isn't as high. So again, you have to try to balance, not just looking at percents, but you also have to look at who's selling the most of these items. So again, I offer that for consideration. So let's see now what some of the key findings are. Well, the first one is looking at sales. Better-for-you products are driving, over the last 5 years, most of the growth. Over 70% of the growth is coming from these better-for-you products. So disproportionate. In other words, you have a little less than 40% of the sales driving over 70% of the growth. That's way out of line. It's disproportionate contribution. Perhaps when you look at the hard sales, the absolute dollar sales of these products increased at a 2-to-1 ratio compared to the traditional products. So again, they're very important. The other thing to remember as we looked at the data is not all better-for-you products succeed. A lot of them flub. And this is a challenge for marketers and the sellers of these products. It's very challenging sometimes to just introduce it. I mean, you can spend all afternoon talking about what grocers do, and they have to pay just to get on the shelf, and the product have to succeed. If they don't succeed, they're kicked off in 6 months. And there's a lot of zeros on our list for 2011 on products that were introduced in 2007 where they peaked and came down. So again, it's not a gimme to do this. So it doesn't say people aren't trying, it just means we have to try very hard to do this. The other very interesting finding is that the companies that grew their better-for-you products more than traditional products, their total company sales were higher. They were about 5% over this period, whereas companies that grew their more traditional products over their better-for-you only grew at 2.2%, and that's a 2.5-to-1 ratio. That's a big deal because what it says, again, put the hat back on, the corporate hat back on, it says that, all right, I see disproportionate potential growth here, and this makes sense for me to pay attention to this. So this is what we found relative to sales, and then we decided to look, all right, let's look at profits. We did have some conversations with some food industry analysts who told us what was important to them as they looked at food companies to determine, well, these good companies to get involved in or not. And operating profit is one of the measures that we looked at. And what we found is that companies that, again, sell a higher percentage of better-for-you products had a 15.3% operating profit margin versus 9.5%. Now, you might say, Hank, what's the big deal here? Well, let me give you some perspective. If you're at if you sell $30 billion worth of foods and beverages, companies equivalent to, let's say, a Coca-Cola or something like that, and your margin goes up 6 points, you just dropped almost $2 billion down to your bottom line pre-tax. Big number. That's as big as the profits of the Forbes 200 company. It's a huge deal. So, number one, if you're a chief financial officer, you want this number to go up. This is a big deal. So, we're seeing that definitely for the companies that market better-for-you products. Every single one of the companies that sells a higher percent of these better-for-you products had operating profits in excess of 14%. Big number, all right? 14 up to 17%, whereas the companies that were selling lower percentage of better-for-you product had lower margins. And again, we're not looking to vilify. It might be their core birthright, but the point is there's a huge difference. And we pulled out the soda guys because their margin structure is higher. And you can see the same kind of parallel pattern. On the left, you see what percent of each company's portfolio is in these better for you. And again, with the soda company, it's driven more by the diet products, if you would. Pepsi is more of a hybrid right now. You know, they own Frito-Lay, they bought Quaker Oats, so they're a little bit of a hybrid. But you see almost a direct correlation between the percent of better for you in their portfolios and their operating profit margins. So again, this gives us good correlation to what we're finding. And we also see that companies, when we look at growth, it's not just the absolute operating profit margin, but also, well, did your profits grow? Did moving into higher percents of better for you products actually have an impact on the growth of your profits? And this clearly suggests yes. Over the 5 years, operating profits grew 50% for the higher companies as opposed to 20%. Big difference. In fact, this is a huge difference. So let's finally look at shareholder return. Again, bottom line for an analyst, I need to say something here. If you're a CEO in a company, your best time and your worst time is the quarterly call with the stock analyst. They can make you or break you. All right, so you need to make sure, and what they care about is they care about return on shareholders. They want to see your operating profit going up. They want to see your sales going up, and if they're not, you're in for a serious grilling. So this is why shareholder returns is so important. So when we look at the stock appreciation, let's say, versus the Standards & Poor's index, and we use Standards & Poor's, which is equivalent to Dow Jones index. Those are the two big indexes that track stocks. You can see that the stock differential versus the Standard & Poor's over 5 years on average is up 60 points versus 39. Again, higher versus the other companies. And when you look at total return to an investor, in other words, if I put $1 into a company, my total return is how much the stock goes up plus how many dividends were paid out to me from that company. And that's a total return. And you can see, again, a very interesting distinction between 50% versus about a third. So again, very consistent. So we're starting to build this preponderance of evidence that is highly consistent. And then when we look at reputation, coming from Core Brand's Brand Power Index, just to give you a top line, it's a metric that is a proven predictor of market value, especially for CPG and beverage companies. It tends to do a good job in that. And it tracks 5 measures. We're calling it reputation in the broadest sense, but it tracks specific reputation, familiarity, favorability, strength of management, and of course the investment potential. Based on this index, when you look at companies, again, that focus more on better for you products versus less focused on it, you can see that there is an improvement or a higher level of rating on this. And let's give an example of a company that we might use. On an earlier chart, we showed that Dannon, really its portfolio looks pretty close to what we're talking about for better for you. The company actually made an intent to improve its portfolio. They actually jettisoned its beer business, its candy business, its chocolate business, its biscuit business, and they actually, in Europe, bought an infant nutrition business. And so now their portfolio looks like this. They basically have Evian and bottled waters. They have the Dannon, of course, the complete cadre of Dannon products, which are really the biggest sellers here in the United States and, again, over in Europe. So the question then becomes, well, all right, here's the one that took the first step and totally revamped the business. Are there any results coming out of it? And when you look at our data, when you bottom line the bottom line on this thing, anywhere from their sales growth to operating profit growth to their performance to their stock price appreciation compared to all their peers in the industry is vastly superior. They're showing 2 to 3 times growth rates higher than their peers. So again, it makes an interesting, it validates what we're talking about. It's not always this clear cut. It's not always this predictive, but it's very interesting to see how a company like Dannon, who is the, if you would, the first leader, the first in, that it's really paying some significant bottom line benefits to them. So when you look at what does this all mean? What does it mean? Is this the silver bullet? No, it's not the silver bullet. but it definitely provides some very powerful evidence that companies that could start shoving their portfolios into more and more better-for-you food are really going to see some benefit to their bottom line and the things that count for them. And we actually are proposing that this better-for-you measurement, just like companies track how much carbon dioxide they put in the air and how much water they use and reduce in their processing, how they can, let's use this metric, as we call it, and adopt it so that we can track our progress, so we can take a look on this. And also a very important point, as I alluded to before, is that it's really important for policymakers and those in the public health community to at least understand what drives the decision-making for these companies, what they have to do first before they can deal with other issues. Because if they don't do first, then they can't really help you. So it's very important. So what we want is we want both healthier products and healthier companies. This is really the bottom line is the bottom line, and the bottom line could work for the public health community. So this is, if we have one message, this is what we'd like to leave with you. And with that, I say thank you for this and appreciate your attention. Now, what I'd like to do at this point is introduce Rick Clauser of Nestle, and I'll read from his bio. Rick is the marketing head for Nestle Infant Nutrition in the United States. He does lead the marketing efforts for the Gerber Foods Company. He oversees a team of over 200 associates. Prior to this, Rick was vice president of Gerber's food portfolio, where he managed the Gerber marketing integration into Nestle. He's also spearheaded some significant innovation initiatives, which tripled the sales of the Gerber Graduates franchise, and he launched the first line of preschooler food products in the U.S. Rick actually began in manufacturing at Nestle and then moved into marketing after getting his MBA at Hofstra University. He's been in the business 25 years in food and beverage business, and he's been a marketing leader at Gerber for 6 years. In April of 2010, Rick led the largest launch campaign in the company history, designated to create advocacy among doctors, parents, and key stakeholders to fight childhood obesity through products, services, and education. I'd like to introduce Rick. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Hank. I really appreciate the introduction. And I'd also like to thank the Hudson Institute for inviting Nestle here today. It's such a great forum, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, for companies like ours and business units like ours to be able to come and tell our story and to really talk about how we are working to drive nutrition, health, and wellness. And I would say, as I get started, that as it is Nestle Infant Nutrition in the U.S., you'd otherwise know us as Gerber, but outside of the U.S., it's primarily a Nestle branded organization. And I'm here today as a businessman, so Hank's not the only marketer on the panel, but I primarily come to you as a marketer who does see that, yes, good food does make great sense, and Nestle understands that well beyond the boardroom. I participate in multiple Nestle in the market activities with other business units, as well as nutrition, health, and wellness forums, and I can tell you this is a very popular topic within the U.S. company. In fact, more specifically on our infant nutrition business, we're a little lucky in this regard because before conversations in the boardroom and at dinner tables have been happening around nutrition, Gerber's foundation was forged on values and commitments to nourish a healthier generation, one baby at a time. So our mission is much more than a slogan or a tagline. It's really how we operate. It's that everyone in the company wears the baby badge, and it's how we do business every day. Our Start Healthy, Stay Healthy system is not only our vision, but what drives our business and our process. So I'd like to take you through an explanation of how this really comes to life from a business standpoint. Everything we do is about nutrition science, and it's delivering the right development appropriate product at each stage. And you can see there's icons within the Start Healthy, Stay Healthy system strategy that talks to products at the right stage, because it's just not about having the right nutrition, it's making sure that the nutrition is right when the infant or the toddler is ready for it, and that it's teaching good behavior as well as bringing good nutrition. So it's a little more complicated than just nutrition science. But also, on top of our science, it's the consumer sensory work that we do, our labs and working with consumers every day that fuel our innovation and education from the inside out. And then finally, our education focus helps us to elevate the nutrition conversation with all the key influencers and stakeholders. And just to give you an example of how this comes to life, so I would start with science. We always start with nutrition science. And we bring that to life. One great example is through our FIT study, which is the Feeding Infant Toddler Study. It's a groundbreaking dietary study. It measured over 3,000 infants' diary studies in 2002, and we repeated the study again in 2008. And this is just to understand insights that we couldn't find anywhere else. There's government guidelines, but there is not, and I'm talking about nutrition standards for children under the age of 4. So that's how we would frame it in the U.S. It gave us a really good snapshot of intakes and dietary patterns, how to fill important nutrient gaps. So as I mentioned, by stage, you could start to see what are the gaps in nutrition. So behavior plays a big role in what are the nutrition gaps. And then finally, the research, the 2002 study, is in public domain. It's not as if we're hiding it. It's been published in 25 peer-review-related articles, and the 2008 is just getting underway now. And some key findings that come out of that were that fruits and vegetables were not consumed as regularly as one might think. In fact, by the 10 months of age, the number one vegetable consumed in 2002 was the French fry. So sweet snacks were being introduced very early in the diet, but snacking is also very critical because as you start to move into toddler stages, children get about a third of their calories while grazing on the go. So making sure you're making good nutrition choices is critical. And then finally, in 2008, there is a silver lining. You know, things were looking a little better. We take all that insight and we benchmark against the 2008 study, and we find that breastfeeding is up. So we start looking at now, as we extend the study through this journey from birth to preschool, we start looking at the fact that breastfeeding is on the rise, which is terrific news. While there is a continuing lack of fruits and vegetables in the diet, the number one vegetable at 10 months anymore isn't the French fry, but you're seeing alarming patterns in toddlers and even older preschoolers, where today preschoolers are more likely to have a sweet snack before they have a fruit and vegetable during the day. So we have our work cut out for us. And to just bring that into product, we take all of that nutrition science, we look at the gaps by stage and what we see, and we look for ways to take that insight and drive it into our product. So it's not just about innovating with a new format, it's really taking our base products and looking at trends and reacting to how consumers are using our products and making them better. So for example, driving fruits and vegetable consumption is still a critical objective of ours. And also, Dannon was mentioned, and the importance of yogurt. We're seeing in very early ages the inadequate intake of essential fatty acids and high sat fat rates. So that translates over into, for example, our little entrees, which are designed for toddlers, so 1 year and above. We ensure that there's at least one serving of vegetables in every single meal, and that we've even converted. We have a mac and cheese there, and you'd think, why is he showing us a mac and cheese as a healthy product? But we actually now have a cheese sauce that's made with squash, so kids are getting even more vegetables within that serving. Also things like fruit pouches. Not that complicated, but a great way for an independent toddler to control their own intake and eat a healthy snack as opposed to something else. And as far as essential fats go, looking at consumption of dairy, primarily under the age of 1. Children aren't really drinking milk, but you can start to see really interesting behaviors where parents are feeding their kids unhealthy fats and a large consumption through dairy. So obviously then adding in omega-3s and low-fat yogurt gives us a great opportunity to get essential nutrients into a child's diet. I could go on, but as you can see, the opportunity is to continue to introduce healthy snacking occasions and meal occasions to consumers. Then we move on to education, and I'll make this quick, but you'll get the point that it really is about taking all of those, the insights around the nutrition science, taking all the products that we're innovating and renovating and thinking through, and then sharing it out. And that's a whole process unto itself. It's not just talking to consumers about them. It's really starting with sharing with the research community. And as I mentioned, it's conferences, it's peer review, it's really noodling over what it is that we're trying to do, what do other people think about these nutrition gaps, and are they real, and is anyone else really investigating this? A lot of times we're presenting out and not hearing as much research coming back in. It tends to be a little more focused on above pour, but it hasn't slowed us down. We continue to beat our drum. And then we move into informing public health and policy, because that's critical too. In fact, the 2002 FIT study helped shape the revised WIC package for infants, and has now gotten fruits and vegetables onto the package and juices off. So in many regards, you'd say, what are they thinking? You know, as a businessman, why are we reducing juice on package? But the bottom line is, it's about making sure that those gaps are filled and the right nutrition is reaching the child at the right age, helping moms and dads make better decisions. And then educating healthcare professionals. We move to the next stage as we work down the waterfall, or the influencer funnel, and we talk to doctors who tell us very frequently that it's not just talking to moms and dads about nutrition, which sometimes they may not have the best training in school, but it's really about talking to obese moms and dads about obese kids, or kids that are not on the optimal growth curve. And how do you communicate that to an adult who may not be seeing it themselves? So developing tools and communication information that allows us to help the doctor communicate that information in a way that isn't threatening to a parent. And then, of course, through customized resources and materials for families. So all of our communication, whether it's advertising, direct mail communications, is really about nutrition and explaining to consumers how they can get information on better nutrition, how to understand serving sizes, et cetera. And to the left there's a little colorful rainbow grid, and what that really shows you is what our interactive nutrition tool is, and I'll just talk about this for a second. It's really something that has worked really well for us. We weren't sure up front how receptive consumers were going to be to an interactive menu planner. It requires a little thought. You've got to kind of work it through online. But in the end, it allows consumers to take what are standards for infant at any stage from 0 to 48 months and think through. It's really focused on 6 months and above when they're eating food. And so thinking through, what do I feed my child in a day? And it isn't just about our products. It's about, hey, you really should be introducing a banana based on the gaps that you're seeing in your diet. And if you don't have one and you're on the go, okay, sure, we have a banana puree. But a banana is great. It's got fiber in it. So does an apple. And it walks you through all the details and then actually rates your menu so that consumers can load data in and see how they're rating versus what it should be. So it's another way to politely inform parents what their child is eating and what they should be doing better to have a healthier diet. And what's really amazing is, with about 600,000 website hits a month, so they're coming in just in general to research 4 million babies a year, 600,000 a month isn't too bad. 60,000 menu planners are downloaded, so 10% of hits end up resulting in a menu planner download. So it just goes to show you that parents are really interested in this information. We're directing them there. We're trying to get them more engaged, but we all have an opportunity to engage parents better in educating them on how to serve better nutrition. So to quote Hank, healthy products do yield healthy products. And I mean this, again, as a businessman, not just from a profitability standpoint, but as someone responsible for an equity that parents trust. 9 out of 10 moms believe that Gerber is her most trusted brand. That inspires us to continue to renovate our products, to give good direction to parents, and as part of Nestle, to acquire early or newly forming families and develop good nutrition habits that we can then pass through the rest of the Nestle business. So we're working collectively to make sure we invest in science and really try and solve this problem as part of a bigger collaborative. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Hank.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. And Rick was being modest on his last chart where actually the Good Start business, based on our hard findings, the data we had showed that it was up actually 30% over the 5 years that we looked at. So again, it's a nice confluence of doing some good things and reaping business rewards at the same time, which is what we're after here. Our next guest is Dr. Susie Crockett. Dr. Crockett is the Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at the General Mills Company. She heads up and directs the Bell Institute of Health and Nutrition. Since 1999, she has been responsible for health and nutrition strategy for the company. She's pretty much been at the forefront of many of these nutritional issues in many, many forums, certainly a number of ones that I've attended. She has definitely been involved in regulatory matters, nutrition affairs, and issues of management and nutrition science. Dr. Crockett has her PhD in epidemiology from the University of Minnesota, BS and MS in nutrition and dietetics also, and has been a fellow at the American Dietetic Association. Dr. Crockett was dean of the College of Human Development at Syracuse University, and prior to that was department chair and faculty member in nutrition in her home state at North Dakota State University. So kindly welcome Dr. Crockett.
I'd like to say thank you to Hank, to the Hudson Institute, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for allowing General Mills to tell you a little bit about our approach to health. So first, we are the 6th largest food company in the world, and we have $15 billion in sales, 35,000 employees, and we market our products in 100 companies. This is the strategy that we follow for our healthy portfolio. We need to deliver health that meets consumers' needs, so that addresses taste, convenience, and nutrition. We address the healthfulness of our total portfolio. We reduce limiters, increase positives, and deliver more food groups of need. And we try to address energy balance, both calories eaten and calories burned, through education, energy density work, and portion control. We have an approach to our product improvement model. It includes first research. So the Bell Institute has a database of 14-day food intakes. It's actually patented and unique to General Mills, but we make a strong effort to understand the contribution and role of the foods we make for the American diet. And we always rely on authoritative nutrition guidance that informs product development. Stealth health is a very important component of the approach we take to health at General Mills. So we know we need to avoid taste compromise. That doesn't mean that our health improved products taste exactly the same, but they don't taste worse. We maintain product safety, performance, and functionality. This is obvious. And we inch down. We help consumers make the changes that they need by making our changes slowly and helping them get used to a different palate. And we must make these products sustainable in the marketplace. So they have to be appealing enough so that consumers will buy them. And I don't have time to tell you the stories today, but we have some interesting stories of things that we've tried that make tons of sense from a health perspective, but consumers simply wouldn't buy them, and we couldn't sustain the products. This is the basis of our approach to health at General Mills. It reflects the strategy that you've just heard of commitment to improve the healthfulness of our total portfolio. So our CEO, in his objectives each year, states the percentage of our portfolio for which we will improve the healthfulness. And that means that he is accountable to our board of directors for this accomplishment. It's the job of the Bell Institute to help each division decide how best to improve the healthfulness of their portfolio and then to track their accomplishment. Just last year, we improved 25% of our total portfolio. And since 2005, we have improved 64% of General Mills' portfolio. We define what counts as an improvement. It has to be, can't be trivial, it has to be at least 10%. Almost all of these improvements are not claimed. So when Hank analyzes the better for you or improved products in our portfolio, he is likely missing some because we don't generally talk about these improvements to our consumers. So I'm going to give you a few examples. This is above and beyond the continuous improvement approach that the health metric has just reflected. And over and above that, we make specific improvements to parts of our portfolio. We know that 95% of Americans do not get the recommended amount of whole grain. So in 2005, we reformulated our entire portfolio of Big G cereals and added at least a half serving of whole grain to them. And we've been continuing to add whole grain since in small and large increments. Today, Big G cereals alone, just General Mills cereals, are the main source of whole grain in children's diets, and they provide 10% of all the whole grain eaten by Americans. We improved our yogurt. We did a study showing that 80% of women in America don't get the recommended amount of calcium. We know that the consumer of our, we call it OSY, our regular yogurt line in the Burcon cups that you might be familiar with, are women, and that they choose yogurt instead of milk. They either won't or don't drink milk. And 80% of them don't get enough calcium. So we did reformulate that particular line in Yoplait this year to provide 50% of the DV of calcium and D in one serving to meet the needs of that particular demographic. And we have been improving the quality of our yogurt by taking out the sugar, and to date, we have taken 20% of all the sugar out of our child yogurts. Sodium reduction. We've made a public pledge that by 2015, we will reduce the sodium by 20% in the top 10 categories by volume that General Mills delivers into the diet. We took a public health approach. Not all of the things on this list are high sodium, but they are high volume. And so we took a look at the total amount of sodium that we are contributing to the burden of Americans, and we chose to concentrate first on those categories. We are also taking the sodium out of everything in our portfolio, but we have publicly announced this first step, and we will be reformulating 600 different SKUs in this process. We've just done the tracking. We track twice a year. We report back to our senior management. That happened yesterday. So this is something General Mills will accomplish. What you measure is what you get, and we measure all of these metrics and report into the company. We're taking the sugar out of cereal. We've moved from an average of about 13 grams of sugar in child cereals. They're all down to 10 today, and we're working on the next increment of 9. We have used a stealth approach to this, easing the sugar down and the sweetness down so that children get used to it and they don't leave cereal for bagels and cream cheese, for instance, which is 3 times the calories. Fiber is deficient. I would render a guess that virtually everyone in this room does not get the required amount or recommended amount of fiber. And we are now providing huge amounts of fiber. I'll get to the details a little bit later, but we are now selling $400 million in the Fiber One brand across the globe and providing fiber in many different forms, many of them very palatable to people who don't get enough. The Bell Institute of Health and Nutrition is the base of the health initiatives in General Mills. We don't do the studies ourselves, but we do commission all clinical research that General Mills does. We conduct dietary intake research. We link to existing science. We are involved in education and advocacy with government policy, health professional education, and promoting science-based decisions. The vision of the Bell Institute is to excel at nourishing our world. We know that we can't accelerate the nutrition of the world, but the people that work in the Bell Institute are passionate about public health and passionate about making our portfolio healthier. And we partner with the businesses at General Mills. we are also accountable to help our business succeed. So we aren't there with the club. We're instead there as a partner and a facilitator, and we believe that we have helped make a difference in our company and change the culture and its dedication to a healthier portfolio. We do a lot with nutrition education. We provide free nutrition education materials for dietitians to use with their clients. They are non-branded materials by and large, and we have distributed over 2 million samples and materials. For instance, we will deliver cases of small boxes of Fiber One cereal and several other cereals, if desired, to health fairs and educational events, if desired and ordered through our website. Because the food industry delivers large volumes into the American diet, we are making enormous contributions to the nutrition quality and to the food groups and nutrients that Americans need. This is just an example. We make Green Giant vegetables, the biggest vegetable brand in the world, and deliver over 1 billion full servings of vegetables each year. Yoplait yogurt provides over 2 billion servings of low-fat dairy. No non-fat dairy. We have taken the fat out of all of our yogurt products. 61 billion servings of fiber, 13 billion full servings, 16-gram servings of whole grain. And in summary, General Mills' strategy and commitment is to deliver healthy options in the products that we create, to advance the public health through continuous improvement. I showed you our health metric accomplishment, which is not touching anything twice, but our health metric is actually internally a continuous improvement tool. So we wipe the slate clean every 3 years, and people can improve their product again. So they might take out sodium first, they might add whole grain second, they might take out calories or sugar third. They can get credit again. But when we say that we've improved 64% of our portfolio, that is a cumulative number. It isn't counting anything twice. We set aggressive goals for product improvement, and we measure our accomplishment, and we report it externally. We make and measure our progress every year. I'm happy to answer questions later, and thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you, Susie. One anecdote I have to add. Well, first of all, one thing that was not mentioned is that General Mills is maybe the only company that actually ties some of their bonuses to improving these metrics that Dr. Crockett talked about. And that's another way to get at these things where it gets, I was going to say ingrained, but I probably shouldn't say that, into the culture. I also wanted to mention something else. I was there too many centuries ago, but when the company first secured the licensing agreement for Yoplait yogurt as brand managers, it was the last assignment we ever wanted to get. We thought that was going to be the dog business, that we didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And it's just so ironic now that all the brands we wanted to work on at that time now have fallen down the tubes, and Yoplait is this massive international brand. So it's just funny how things change. I also want to note that our data, just in support of one of our slides on the Fiber One, show that at least for the versions, and we probably missed some of the stealthy ones now. I understand your point on that. The ones that met our criteria, better for you, actually grew 350% over the last 5 years. So again, it just try to reinforce the message that it can be good, or at least better for you, and also be good for the company. So there's nothing inconsistent with that. So again, thank you very much for that. Our next person is Laura Berry. And Laura is the Executive Director of the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility, and she leads that organization's strategy of emphasizing community, social justice, and responsible investing. Laura has a very interesting background, actually. Besides being in a nonprofit organization that she is now, she actually spent 17 years on Wall Street. So like myself, we are hybrid types of people bridging two worlds, which is sometimes we wonder what our DNA really is, but it makes for an interesting life. She was the large cap portfolio manager on Wall Street, where she focused on socially responsible investing and also managed portfolios for a number of religious organizations. In 2001, she left Wall Street, began her nonprofit career with the New London Development Corporation's Community Development Initiative. She then served the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven for 5 years as Vice President of Development and later as Senior Vice President for Philanthropic Services before leaving to join ICCR. So please help me welcome Laura Berry.
Thank you, Hank, so much for that kind and perhaps perplexing introduction. Hank was kind enough not to mention my 5 years as a chemical engineer making beer cans. I'd also really like to thank John and the Hudson Institute, as well as my friends from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, for having me here today. The Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility is a 40-year-old coalition of faith and values-based investors. Now, we have a lot to say about the data that Hank's presenting today, as well as have had decades of engagement with Nestle, with General Mills, because we believe that as long-term investors with fiduciary responsibility to ensure safe retirements for people, to help foundation assets grow, to have very robust investment results, we really believe that we don't make a compromise by including justice and sustainability in some of the work that we do. And so a couple of the things I'm going to share with you today is, first of all, how it is that our system has accommodated the idea of food in general, and how it is that this better for you data can really make a huge difference to investors and to the folks that provide the capital, frankly, to allow companies like General Mills and Nestle to grow and develop and continue to make better for you products. But also to talk just a little bit about how all of this connects for us. And I'm going to do all of this in about 3 minutes. One of the reasons that I brought this piece of paper up with me was because our panelists so far have made some of the most pithy and wonderful comments that connect to everything we do and we care about. So our 300 members, who represent somewhere north of $100 billion in invested assets, really believe that, and I'm going to quote one of our panelists directly, that we can make products healthier without making them taste worse. Susie, I think you said that. And what I mean when I say how that relates to ICCR's work and the work we've been doing for the last 40 years engaging with companies is that we really believe that companies create value when they recognize that operating in just and sustainable ways actually is really good for business. And so the thing that we are so excited about with Hank's work is that he's actually begun to go down to some of the core drivers that investment managers who look at value and how companies grow really look at, and started to tie them in ways to the kind of public policy and behavior that ICCR members have been so interested in moving and changing and developing. So let me just share for you one very quick example of how we work. Again, as I said, we're a coalition of faith and values-based investors. We're global in footprint, but we have a huge focus on U.S. domestic health outcomes. Many of our members are health systems, as many of you know. And so we've been increasingly concerned about the impact of products and marketing on childhood obesity, as has Robert Wood Johnson, as have many, many public policy advocates. And we've been trying for years now to get our handle around how can we get corporations in the packaged good industries, in the beverage industries, and in fact in the restaurant industry as well, to work with us to use the power of their brands, the power of their marketing, the power of their presence in society to help initiate the behavior change that, frankly, our public health system has not really been able to get started or to get its hands around. Because we believe when corporations make decisions about measuring things like carbon footprints or measuring things like caloric footprints, that they actually change the world faster while growing their businesses better. And so when I was first introduced to Hank and his work and started to see the direction it was going and started to see that it was actually providing a kind of evaluation confirmation that from, if you will, religious communities in urban neighborhoods in the U.S. who actually see the impact on kids in schools, who see the impact in health facilities, who see the impact in neighborhoods, and started to think, how can we, with retirement plans, with huge investments, how can we really encourage companies without actually demanding that they move outside of their product lines? The kind of work that's been presented today is such a powerful tool. So as ICCR continues its work in the food area, in how do we address a safe and sustainable food system and how do we help build it, tools like this, the kind of work that General Mills and Nestle is doing, the kind of support that Robert Wood Johnson is providing, is powerful beyond the kinds of things that I think any of us can imagine. And I think when you think about the food system and you think about how we are all in this together, there is a system that goes all the way from commodities speculation, which raises prices on their supply chains for really no value creation, all the way down through how do we advertise, how do we market to our kids, and what do we do in the various public settings that we find ourselves. That whole chain is very important, and the better metrics we have and the better conversations we have about that, the faster we will change. But at ICCR, as investors, we firmly believe that if corporations get behind this work, as these folks are doing, it can make a huge difference. And Hank's work is really starting to show us that actually we've got the numbers to back it up. So as investors, we celebrate this effort. As people who live in the world and are trying to work toward more justice and more sustainability, all we can really say is bravo, and thank you for including our voice in this work. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura. Again, that's terrific. We appreciate that very much, and we can see, again, we're talking about an alignment between doing the right thing and also being good for business. Our final presenter or speaker is Dr. Jim Marks. Dr. Marks is the Senior Vice President and Director of the Health Group at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. I must say that Dr. Marks is a giant in the health community. He directs all the programs and administrative activities and includes the Foundation's work on childhood obesity, public health, and vulnerable population. Prior to joining the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in 2004, Dr. Marks was Assistant Surgeon General after serving as Director of the Center for Disease Control's National Center on Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion for almost a decade. Throughout his tenure at CDC, Dr. Marks developed and advanced systematic ways to prevent and deter diseases such as cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, reduce tobacco use, and address the nation's growing epidemic of obesity. We are very, very pleased to have Dr. Marks with us today. Thank you.
I want to thank you all for being here, especially Hank and his team and the Hudson Institute. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is the largest foundation devoted solely to improving the health and health care of all the American people. And as many of you know, we at the foundation believe that the childhood obesity epidemic may be the most urgent public health threat of our time. Nearly 1 in 3 children is overweight or obese in the U.S. today. Some experts warn that if we fail to reverse the obesity epidemic, the current generation of young people may be the first in American history to live sicker and die younger than their parents. And as more and more overweight children become overweight adults and suffer from the diseases due to obesity, and the nation experiences the diminished productivity, and various reports have said that the epidemic and its economic costs could even affect our national security and global competitiveness. The stakes don't get any higher. Now, there's been a lot of progress over the past few years in the movement to prevent childhood obesity. We've seen national policymakers, community leaders, and parents take action around the nation. That's all good. We've also seen industry, as you're hearing today, start to get involved, from commitments secured by the Partnership for a Healthier America, and the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation's affiliated companies, to restaurant chains making their children's meals healthier. This is encouraging, but we need to see more of these actions until the evidence becomes clear that the cumulative effect is reversing the epidemic. As Hank noted, the food and beverage industry plays a big role in American life. They make and sell the items we all eat and drink every day. But we know these companies do not exist to improve public health. They exist to make profits. We've said for some time that selling healthier foods and beverages is the right thing for companies to do, but until now we haven't had much information about whether it makes good business sense for them to do so. We supported the Hudson Institute's work on this report because we wanted to explore that possibility. Will consumers buy good-tasting, healthier foods and beverages? Will they do so in large enough numbers for companies to make a reasonable profit selling those products? The research that Hank has just presented begins to show us that the answer is likely yes. This is important. When food and beverage companies sell healthier items, it looks to be healthier for the companies as well, as Hank said. Some food and beverage companies are leading the industry in figuring this out and structuring their product portfolios in response. To those who saw this wave coming earlier, we congratulate them and encourage them to do even more. To the companies that are lagging, the evidence is clear. They need to get on board. Their customers want healthier products and are ready to buy. Any effort to make it easier for Americans to buy healthier foods and beverages is a good one. And this is big news. The 15 companies analyzed in this report sell almost 1/3 of the packaged goods and beverages purchased by American families. As Hank mentioned, will better-for-you products be the silver bullet, the single vital step to reversing the epidemic? Absolutely not. But it is crucial for families to have better availability of healthy, affordable, good-tasting choices. You can't eat a better diet if there aren't better choices to buy. That said, I want to offer a word of caution. The report also said that companies with better-for-you product portfolios were held in high regard by the public. A strong, trusted corporate brand is a huge asset in the marketplace. There are real market opportunities in selling truly healthy products, but public trust in a brand would likely be damaged if a health claim is made where it is not warranted. It's encouraging to see that public health and business interests can have strong common purpose, because we still have a long way to go to reverse the obesity epidemic. As with all research we fund, we try to look for ways to strengthen it and make sure the findings are merited. The analysis here is encouraging. But that said, we also want industry analysts to examine the company's efforts to sell more better-for-you products, as well as the resulting impact on the company's overall performance. I want to close my remarks by emphasizing that while industry can and should do its part to improve the American diet, it can only play one part. No single industry effort can take the place of people making healthier choices for themselves and their families. But industry can help make good-tasting, affordable, healthy food and beverages the easiest to choose choice, the popular choice. Today's report tells us that companies can do well while doing good. Ultimately, that should mean that it's possible to have healthier companies and a healthier nation, and we have to have both. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marks. And just to add to those comments, tying it back to my own crossing the Rubicon, a lot of times we don't recognize a paradigm shift. Just kind of shows up and it's long gone. And today, we believe, is a paradigm shift in the way we look at tackling this issue of obesity and childhood obesity and for their families. It's a new day. We don't have all the answers, but it's a good start, and it's a way to look at all the players in this problem, and we'll look at new solutions and continue to do so. So thank you for being here. We now open it up to questions and answers to myself or any of the panel members. We appreciate your question. There's a microphone here going around.
Hank, you started off talking about your health profile and how that impacted your desire to work on a project like this. And I was wondering if you had looked at the company policies and how their health insurance or corporate wellness might impact how they develop or what they develop.
And this study did not do that. I mean, the one piece of data we do have, obviously, is that the cost to employers is $73 billion when you talk about obesity and how it affects productivity and absentee rates and what's called presenteeism. But no, that is beyond the scope of this. We really focused, again, we're trying to create the business case here and be able to, in essence, bring a McKinsey-like presentation to the senior executives to show them a roadmap as to how they might improve their bottom lines to go in this direction. Thank you. Can we get the mic out to people?
My question's for you, Hank. What kind of audience do you want to communicate this information to, and how do you plan on communicating this information?
That's a good question. Actually, I don't want to say all audiences. The focus is on corporations, but also on the public health community. I think it's important for both those groups to appreciate what's going on here, because it's like any negotiation. You have to understand what the other party's goals and needs are before you can find that middle ground. So the more the public health community understands the way business makes their decisions, that'll be very helpful to them going forward. Conversely, it'll help corporations make better decisions as they look in this arena. So I'd say those are the two primary audiences. Okay, thank you. Yes, lady back there.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. This is a question for our food companies. As you bring forward the healthier products, I know over time there's been companies that have brought healthy foods forward, both in the fast food restaurants and in others. To what degree did you put promotional dollars behind those, independent of other products? Do you think that's a helpful piece of it? I know you did a lot of educational pieces, but to degree of advertising and other promotional dollars went ahead.
I'll take it first. For instance, with our Fiber One brands, we've done, maybe you've seen some of the ads on TV. We do advertise them fairly heavily in order to promote them. And it was we've had Fiber One cereal for a long time. We call it Twigs. You can picture that. And some people will eat Twigs, but a lot of people won't. And so we understood that we did research and we identified a very large consumer group called fiber seekers, but they couldn't find anything that tasted to them. Tasted good and was convenient enough. So we developed the brand, and then we spoke to those fiber seekers through our advertising. I think it illustrates a really important point that marketing is not about, you have to be meeting a consumer need. That's how we start all of our product development. So we're actually responding to consumers more than trying to change consumers. But when you identify a need like that with fiber seekers, it's relatively easy to develop a marketing campaign to deliver what they are asking for. Okay, you're seeking fiber? Here's a convenient, good tasting. I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, we put lots of marketing expertise and money behind all of our products.
So I would add, I wholeheartedly agree. There are but there are, with our space, there is still an evolution around healthy eating and differentiating with parents between what adult nutrition looks like and what infant and toddler nutrition looks like. So it's a combination of things. We will advertise to drive awareness of a new kind of product, like a yogurt product that otherwise would have never been in our aisle, but also to talk about the nutritional goodness and serving size. All of those things are part of how we would communicate to a mom, whether it's TV or through her doctor's office or online. So absolutely, it's about driving awareness and making sure that consumers understand the value of good nutrition, but also part of it is just space advertising tied to announcing a new product arrival.
I will say that in general, and I know that General Mills is not the only company, just talking about the healthfulness isn't very persuasive to most consumers. Would be to those of you in this room. We get it, but talking about fiber that tastes good, that or is convenient, that's the piece that tends to work with consumers versus and now healthier.
All right, thank you. We've been tweeted, so we have a question that came over Twitter. The question is, better for you food products are better for business bottom lines, but are they changing our hefty waistlines? That's a great question, and I'm not sure we have that answer yet. I mean, we look specifically at the business criteria. I can say a fact I didn't share today was that when you look at the percent per capita consumption of traditional products actually went down over the last 5 years by 3%, whereas the better-for-you products kind of hung in there through the recession. So it suggests a very positive trend going in the right direction, but I think we'd have to do a lot more work to link it directly to reductions in obesity rate. Again, we'd love to see that. I think there's more work to do on that. So thank you for the question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Charles Bethesda, Maryland. I have a couple questions. First, if I heard correct, since the French fry is the biggest volume consumed, and my question is this: should we make a French fry more healthy food? And question to Dr. Crockett. We need quite amount of vitamin D in daily life. Do you know how much dose of D used in your yogurt? And should there have an effort that to anybody and need to develop the sodium-like material for sodium, like we have a sugar-like material?
Why don't we try to answer the first two questions for you first? Dr. Crockett, you want to take that second question?
Well, there's a little bit of controversy about exactly how much vitamin D Americans need, and we have a recent IOM report, but what we do know is that very significant numbers of women, in excess of 70%, don't get at least an estimate of the daily value. So, and then yogurt, of course, is a very important source for those women who don't drink milk. I can't tell you what percent of the total vitamin D in the American diet comes from yogurt. I just don't have that information. But it's a good question. So, we might try to look into that.
Rick, you want to, since you brought up French fries before,
Sure,
you want
absolutely.
to tackle that one?
Well, the one interesting about yogurt in our age range is more by the time a child is over 7 to 8 months, probably close to 80% of the food it consumes, so it's whatever it may be, is table food. And so it's not just what the child is eating, but portion control too. So so healthy yogurts, making sure that omega-3s and omega-6s, vitamin D is part of it. It's also about healthy fats, and talking, just like on fiber, talking to parents about fat from an adult standpoint doesn't sound like something you might want to ingest, but healthy fats are really important. And then on the French fry front, that's a great question. I think anything's better than the current French fry. But I would also say that as a starch, there's so much more to developing a palate. It's about not just sweet fruits, but also savory vegetables, and teaching a child very early on that it's a variety of flavor experiences that they need. That's what really develops a healthy palate. So the salt levels and the fact that it is a potato, they'll probably consume plenty of potatoes in their life. So I'd opt for a green bean fry as opposed to a potato fry.
Yes,
And
you had one more question?
Last important question is this. We know milk for baby is not as good as mother milk. And this maybe Mr. Clauser can answer. Have any effort or show an effort to try make milk for baby more like mother milk? Thank you.
Or I missed the first part. It was something about the milk isn't
Mother's milk.
milk. So you're saying
Mother's milk.
mother's milk is better. Yes, yes, absolutely. So the first component of our Start Healthy, Stay Healthy system absolutely is that breastfeeding is best. For moms that cannot breastfeed or choose not to, there comes a point where the whole focus is about driving up the level of breastfeeding in the U.S., to be specific about our market here. And we are absolutely supportive of that process. In fact, we have a 24/7 hotline where moms can call and talk to RDs, nutritionists, and certified lactation experts to try and help them stay breastfeeding longer. So should a mom choose not to, there are formula brands. We're one of the smaller ones. But absolutely, the objective is to try and keep mom breastfeeding as long as possible. It's the best way to develop an immune system.
Okay. Any additional questions? Yes, we get this gentleman right here.
Thank you all for your thoughtful comments. I had a question, and Susie, you mentioned healthfulness across your product lines, and I'm sort of being in public health for a little while, and on the government level, the concern I have is healthfulness across populations. And this city and many others deal with the disparities that there are between access and affordability, if you will, of food and food products. What is your company and Nestle or anybody else who wants to speak to this from the podium actually doing with respect to trying to level that playing field? Because we find that access and affordability are two of the major issues with respect to the obesity problem.
Well, that's a great question, and we are very concerned, as you are, about disparities, and we see that as a significant problem, and we would like to be part of that solution. It's not magic, but I'll just give you one example. We've just done a study because we make a lot of cereal. We wanted to understand the role of ready-to-eat cereal in the diets of food-insecure children. So we used NHANES, and we estimated food insecurity using the questions that were available in NHANES, and we actually found that ready-to-eat cereal is more important to the nutriture of food insecure children than it is to the remainder of children in the NHANES data set. What that reflects is that ready-to-eat cereal is available in food deserts. It is an ubiquitous product, and it's relatively affordable also in those settings. That is not maybe a comprehensive answer to your question, but we are very interested in finding ways to make sure that the products that are healthy in our portfolio are available to everyone.
And then I would also add, I mentioned WIC, Women, Infant, Children, which is government subsidized feeding programs. It might be shocking for all of you to know that currently 52% of consumers in the U.S. qualify for WIC. And part of our FIT study early on in 2002 identified that fruit and vegetable consumption I mentioned wasn't as high as it needed to be. So part of our support is lobbying with government and changing the food package for infants. And now fruits and vegetables are on, so they are subsidized. Consumers get free fruits and vegetables under the age of 1. So that doesn't necessarily drive the product into the right location, but it helps to really allow us to not only get product, but also educational materials through WIC offices out to those consumers who may not be seeing a doctor and can be influenced very strongly by a WIC office clinician on what is healthy eating. And we support all of that.
I just wanted to add one quick item to that. we have recognized for a long time that this is a problem. General Mills has a foundation project called Champions for Healthy Kids. We give $10,000 grants to local leaders for culturally appropriate, locally applied initiatives to promote youth nutrition and fitness. We are about to complete our first 10-year period of that, and we've given $23 million to those local initiatives. Our evaluation shows that the most powerful impact of that philanthropy has been on low-income and minority children. And so we're just framing up the next 10-year program and getting advice from various experts, many of them from the University of Minnesota, since it's right at home, in order to target it more clearly to the audiences with the greatest need.
All right, thank you. There was one question in the back of the room there.
To what extent have you engaged the restaurant industry in this work, given that they are a major part of the distribution system for food?
Yeah.
And what have been some of the challenges?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, this study focused on the packaged goods companies and the beverage companies. We are hoping to look at the restaurant segment. Obviously, they're actually larger than the grocery segment, so it'll be something that we'll be in discussions with, and hopefully there will be work done on that. But you are correct. It is the largest segment. Yes.
This is a question relating to marketing. I assume Mr. Klosser has marketing surveys. Do you find consumers who consume more because they think it's healthy and it's less sugar, less fat, so they buy more and they eat more? Thank you.
Good question. In our space, in the infant space, our biggest challenge is teaching parents what appropriate serving sizes are for infants. So if I have a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, I don't double or triple the caloric intake by year based on the size of the child. They don't need that kind of energy to grow. So what we find more so in our space is that parents who move their children to table food rather quickly tend to just get a little lax with serving sizes once the child is at the table, and they're not thinking about portion control. So in general, if a family is eating healthy, the child will eat healthy, but portion control needs to be top of mind. If a family is eating unhealthy, that's where the bigger challenge comes in, because the child really has no choice but to eat unhealthy. So I would say it's probably more about portion control for our age range than it is about people consuming more because it tastes good.
Yeah, if I can just add to that one thing that's very important to glean from looking at the consumer is one size does not fit all. There are multiple segments of consumers. We did some early analysis about 1.5 years ago, which indicated that there were oversimplifying three segments. One segment, which is about 25% of the population, got it. They walked their talk, they ate well, they exercised, they took care of things. You had the second segment, which was about 40% of the population. We call them lovingly dazed and confused because they're very busy, they're running around, a lot of young moms trying to figure out what kind of time they have to do anything, or some people who are confused about nutrition messages. And then you have the last group, which is what we call the later group or get lost group. And don't tell me that's my story, I'm sticking to it. So it's very important to understand, particularly as we were talking about doing tree bark into Fiber One for some people. I mean, it's important for a small group of consumers, but we also have to look at the rest of the consumers. They're not all treated the same.
I have to defend Twigs too. I just got a note from Laura saying, it might interest you to know that I love Twigs and even add it to other cereals. And I have to say that I'm a Twig lover too. Nothing against Twigs, it's just that a lot of consumers are not fans.
This would be the highest concentration of Twig lovers in one room that I've ever found. All right. Well, thank you all in the audience for coming today. Thank you watching the webinar for coming. I thank our panelists here. And I thank everybody who supported us, and particularly I thank the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for their strong support. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'm going to try and make a 2 o'clock train, which is the train that
Pleasure
I'm
meeting you,
booked
Laura.
on. It was so good to meet
Thank
you
you.
all.
Great.
Absolutely. Take care. All right. Safe travels back.
Well, keep getting a lot of you.